pronounce Mauro?
Yeah,
Well,
Mauro.
Oh,
all right. Well, everybody, welcome. We're
I thought
live.
it was Moro,
Every
which happens very often. I'm like, Muro, how did you get that?
yeah. Welcome everybody to the Gio and Joey Show. Here we have a special guest. Joey, introduce our guest and the topic for tonight.
yeah. I think it was last week. I saw a very informative conversation over on my friend Mikhail Olson's podcast, and it was with our guest Ryan Mauro. And so I kind of did some digging. I looked at more of his stuff, and he definitely has the credentials to speak. Right, he's got experience in this topic. He's a journalist, right? He's worked in kind of how like various espionage and foreign influence operations work. And so I thought this conversation, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring Ryan on is because obviously in the Gio and Joy Show, we really care about religious liberty. We care about the state of our society from a conservative perspective in these things. But like I feel like oftentimes many Americans, many conservatives, many Christians don't understand the ways in which some of the people which they may be watching or they may be trusting may not have the same motives or the same agendas as them, right? But they're not open about it. And so I wanted to talk with Ryan about his experiences and what he's seen. Before we get into that, how you doing tonight? And what you've been up to?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm doing all right tonight. Just been doing the normal thing, except watching Candace Owens' meltdown has been rather entertaining over the past like week. So just been doing that, but the work that I've done on Candace Owens is really just a proxy for what you described before, which is my specialty in extremism and hostile foreign influence operations, which I've studied back since I was a kid, actually. And so when some people say, "Well, why are you talking about Candace constantly?" It's like I think by the end of this conversation, you'll see why. Because she is a perfect microcosm of a bigger problem, but she's also potentially going to get even worse.
All right, before we dive into tonight's specific topic, just give us a little bit background because you mentioned that you've been kind of interested in this kind of subject since you were a kid. Influenced by James Bond or what's going on? Like, what got you into this?
Lack of options. I couldn't play sports. I was like very isolated as a kid because of various difficulties I had to deal with. And basically, I didn't have a family background in this or anything. It was just the news was on. I got my first computer. I started looking into it, and I became obsessed with it, and it became how I enjoyed my life. It was like my escape. And so at a really young age, like 11 or 12, I mean, I was already reading books and on this topic and had mounds of notes and trying to figure it all out. And now in some amazing way, it's all kind of come together. Even my biblical stuff that I've done on the side, I've done some biblical history work. It's just been amazing to see how all the different facets of what I was involved in all kind of come together, really for this moment and moments in recent history, where I just always saw these as things in a separate box. But now I'm seeing that the things that I learned during those years when I was a kid and things were tough, um, thank God I learned it then, because it's enabled me to decode some of what's going on now.
Okay. So I'd like to hear more about the biblical history, but I'm fascinated about the Russian influence because, in a couple of campaigns ago, right, it was alleged of Trump being in collusion with a Russian interest. And then recently here we had people like Candace and I forgot his other name, the Jew hating.
Tucker?
No, the other guy who
Nick
hates,
Fuentes?
yeah, Fuentes. Like we're all
Uh,
spotted being in Russia, or like what's all that about?
yeah, Tucker was in Russia. I don't think Nick Fuentes has actually gone
Okay.
to Russia, although I'm sure he would love to.
Hmm.
So the big picture here is, aside from the fact that I think a lot of it has to do with contrarianism, like that's just they're just like natural rebels. So it's like in their mind, it's a left wing thing to say Russia is bad, which is amazing considering the Republican Party is the party of Ronald Reagan, but somehow it's
Mm-hmm.
flipped. And so once it became seen as, oh, hating Putin is a left wing thing, then people started loving Putin. This was around really after Obama was elected. It was really just a contrarian and tribal type thing. And so that's kind of what was happening on the personal level. And then people getting, when you have resentment towards society, you say, all right, well, who's like the rebel internationally? And so a lot of people gravitate towards Putin. But on a bigger level, what's been going on since actually even before the Soviet Union collapsed is that the Soviets and then the Russians decided that what they needed to do was have their intelligence services essentially mimic Christianity. The
Mm-hmm.
Russian Orthodox Church was controlled by the KGB. Everybody knew it. This was not a topic of debate back then. But as communism was falling apart, they actually put together a team and said, well, what do we do with our ideology? We have to revitalize it. And they said we need to combine nationalism with communism, with Orthodox Christianity, and that's the way forward. And the same person who oversaw that team then created a think tank after the Soviet Union fell, pushing conspiracy theories and disinformation, particularly targeting the right wing of America. So there's been an ideological offensive targeting American conservative Christians for a long time, and you're just seeing the fruits of it now. I saw it a long time ago, but it was like it was just like the beginning fireworks of a show, some
Mm-hmm.
sparks here and there, and it was enough for me to say something's going on. But now you're starting to see them really take off.
Mm. Yeah, and so obviously, I fully agree with that. And could you kind of go in? So obviously, I believe you're talking about Aleksandr Dugin there, right? Is the guy you're talking about?
Actually, I was talking about a different. He followed a separate track, but they've dovetailed. So Dugin is, people dismiss him as a philosopher, but he's called Putin's brain because of how much influence he had. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's also an exaggeration to say he's only a philosopher. I mean, if you look at the entities he's involved in, they have been sanctioned for their involvement even in military operations, intelligence, disinformation operations. Like he's a real player. But he goes back to the 90s as well. This guy, Aleksandr Dugin, who a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
woke right, as it's called, are seeing almost like their pastor or their like imam, you could say. He just burst onto the scene in the past like 5 years, really, in a big way. And so people are paying attention to him. But he goes back to 1997 was when his first big book came out. And that's where he was saying, look, the way to defeat the West is to empower the isolationist strains within the right-wing Republican circles and do everything you can to empower the fissures in American society. And from the Russian perspective, they don't believe that America is a melting pot. They think that's all a mirage. And so they would say, look at anywhere where like there's a black majority population or Hispanic or anytime there's a minority anywhere, to them, that's a weakness that you can inflame. And so they said, boost, or Dugin said, what we need to do is boost anything that's like a racist movement, a sectarian movement, any type of extremist movement can be leveraged against the U.S. And so we'll defeat them geopolitically, but at the same time, we ultimately want to destroy them.
Mm-hmm.
We need to destroy their civil society. He was absolutely right about that. He's wrong about the nature of America, but he was right that toxifying our civil society so that we can't function and learn and talk to each other because it's so filled with hatred and tribal thinking, that is absolutely the way to destroy us. So he was ahead of his time that way. But it wasn't until it was like 2002, late 2002, that I first heard of him, and I read some translations of his book because his book wasn't available fully in English yet, I don't think, at least not through him. I forget if it was entirely translated, but there were enough translations of him that I knew of the guy. And I remember talking about him and reading his stuff and thinking, this is like metaphysical garbage because it had all this occult type stuff in it
Mm-hmm.
and just weird terminology. And it read like a grad student who just learned academic terms. So he just put 1,000 of them in every sentence, like just trying too hard. And I was like, this guy's a blip in the radar. Like if he's going to succeed, he's going to have mentor other people who know how to talk and write. This isn't, I thought because of his influence, it would carry on. So he was dangerous that way. But I didn't think he himself would develop this huge fan club. And then here we are today. He bursts onto the scene, and you have people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Glenn Greenwald, even though he's not a conservative, but he's making conservative circles now. All these people interviewing him and praising him, and I'm like, I just can't believe that's the same guy because he hasn't changed. He just we
Yeah, let me ask you a two-part question here, because for the mainstream audience, they know the names Tucker Carlson, they know Candace, they know Megyn Kelly. What do you think has been the primary in with them? Just overwhelm them with a lot of cash, or do you think they're actually believing the philosophies of this individual? Like, do you think that's how they got in? And then, the second part is usually the Candaces, the Megyn Kellys, the Tuckers. That's just like the mirage, right? What is the underground places they're influencing to try to bring this about?
So I don't think it's cash. I know a lot of people assume it, and it might be because there's these crazy cases in the history of espionage and influence operations where someone's already rich, but just to get a little bit more rich, they end up taking money, or they're in a lot of debt and nobody knows it. So they look rich, they're living a rich lifestyle, but they're actually in debt. And so they get recruited. So it's possible, but I'm not seeing the evidence of that. I think they genuinely believe it. Now, why do they genuinely believe it? They probably think it's because of their own critical thinking. But the Russians are the masters at psychological warfare. They call it cognitive warfare. They view people as robots, essentially, that you just have to figure out the right inputs and the wiring to make it do what you want. And so they are able to, and they put so much effort into it, swarm an ecosystem so that you're just bombarded with certain messages. They're able to leverage personal resentment, all of these types of things. So I think some of it is genuine, where if you're mad at the U.S., especially if you're a conservative or a Christian, and you start gravitating towards those conspiratorial parts of the internet, that's where Russia sucks you in. I think that's primarily it. But that being said, you can be a part of that ecosystem and without liking Dugin. And if you read his stuff, like Candace Owens says she has 2 of his books. His books are hard to read. I don't know if she actually read them, but she has 2 of them. And I still feel like there's something. He's not a captivating person. He's not funny. Like, there's no reason to get close to the guy. First of all, to get attracted to his specific ideology that he pushes. You can still become pro-Russia and buy into the propaganda, but to get into his little weird thing that he has going, that's strange. It's strange to even know who he is. It's strange to get into it, and then to develop a relationship. That's kind of like a black hole where I'm like, all right, once they reach out to him, what is it that goes on here that captivates people? Because I don't think he's impressive in any way. And so what goes on there, I don't know. Something happens.
Yeah. So one of the things that I find interesting about it, right? So when you have a guy, like, I could see, like, maybe if you're like one of those people who's just openly you don't like America, and then you hear a guy saying he wants to destroy America, I could see, okay, well, that makes sense, right? Like, unfortunately, there's people, right? I live in Michigan, right? There's people in Dearborn who, like, have a memorial service for Khamenei, right? But they say death to America, right? So that makes sense to me. Like, I don't like it. I don't like that it's in my country. But a lot of the people that are promoting, like, Dugin and these things will say, I love America, right? I'm America first. Like, I guess, could you kind of maybe expand, how do you think that particular connection happens, right? Like, how do you claim to be an American patriot and then wind up promoting a guy who says, I want to destroy America from within?
So there's a few ways it's happening. On the grassroots level, they've been able to make it sound like America first means anti-foreigner, and take a legitimate concern about foreign influence, and they leverage it just against Israel. And then they leverage it from there to say, well, Israel is equivalent with Jews, because most Jews do support Israel regardless of how they vote or what they think of Israeli policy. So it's very easy to go from saying my top concern is my patriotic duty, America first, to kick out the non-American entities. And who would that be? Israel's the biggest. And then therefore that means the Jews. All right, well, who are the Jews? Then that's the Christian Zionists. It's very easy to go from there and have this false, like, link chart, like a link analysis chart, saying, well, this person's connected to this person, who's connected to this person, who's connected to this person, and then you ultimately decide, okay, I just need to go after and target the entire right-wing Christian world, the evangelicals, because they're all Christian Zionists. Oh, and then it turns into the Republican Party. So you can see this graduation in thought among all of these people, where all of a sudden it starts with saying, well, I think the U.S. shouldn't give money to Israel. I can understand points of that. I mean, Israel even wants to get rid of American aid. They want to wean themselves off of it. But then that gets magnified. It gets exaggerated in terms of how big of a problem it is, when really it's actually a relatively small amount, and there's a return on the investment. Then it turns into, all right, well, this is so ridiculous, because you get into the ecosystem where you're constantly vindicated. So you say, all right, well, my opinion is so right, so correct, that the people against it must be bribed. They must be propagandized. They must be satanic, because you're not seeing the legitimacy of the other point of view. So you assume there's something nefarious. And once you see something nefarious, you say, well, it's my duty as a good person to expose it, to find out more. And so it's kind of like it hinges right there. And that's when it goes off into crazy land. So that's in terms of messaging, where it's gone, and where America First became America Only. And it became this idea that to be America First means, we have to have a paradise before we can consider a relationship with any foreign country, without considering the fact that we benefit from all of that. It is America First to leverage alliances overseas that are worthy. The other part is just getting people into conspiracy theories in general does lead to arguably anti-Semitism, maybe not quite there, but it gets people very, very close to that lane. But certainly dovetails with pro-Russia sentiment. Like, you look at conspiracy theory world, and it's like the same ecosystem as what happens with it in the pro-Russia world. I don't know if that noise is coming from me, or is that...
No, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's Joey when you moved your stuff.
Well, I moved it because there's something. I'm going to leave and come back, guys.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right.
So part of the strategy was the Russians made this calculation that if through fronts we can get Americans to say, it's called narrative laundering. If we get Americans to say things that we want to say, it won't be seen as ridiculous. And so this is according to the Treasury Department and government documents as an open fact. So they say, all right, well, our way in is to get Americans to repeat what we say. Now, how do we do that? We promote conspiracy theories in general. They recognize that by pumping up the conspiracy theory part of like the culture and civil society, but especially once the internet became a real thing, that would very easily open the door for Russian disinformation. So it doesn't even matter what type of conspiracy theory, just get people in there, and then you're 90% of the way towards getting especially the influencers to adopt Russian disinformation, because that mindset just kind of leads there. You can easily feed it to them. And then anti-Semitism is very, very close to that. You have to go a little step further in your radicalism, but you get very, very close.
Earlier you mentioned the Bible, and so, we just met, and so I don't know your persuasion. Is it Roman Catholic or is it Protestant? Where do we lean there?
It's not denominational Protestant, but I openly say I'm not a theologian, so I don't advocate for any part of Christianity because I'm not qualified to. I just know that based on my experience, it's real and it's right.
Okay, yeah.
They have wonky arguments to other people.
All right. So that being said, the influencers we mentioned, Candace Tucker, Megyn Kelly, do you see anything in the fact that they lean Catholic or they are Catholic?
For the moment, yes, but originally the Tsarist Christianity promoted by Russia first started getting picked up by people like Pat Buchanan, who I don't think was Catholic.
No.
I don't think so. But Protestants did start getting into that originally, and then it just so happened in terms of the influencers, it was through Catholics. Specifically, it was called traditionalist Catholicism, which isn't actually traditional Catholicism, lowercase t. So if someone out there is a Catholic and they're offended by this, I'm not saying, oh, if you're a Catholic with traditional values, you're a part of this. But
Yeah.
there's an actual name of a belief called the traditionalist Catholicism, and that tends to be more retrograde, more authoritarian leaning, more pro Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just more, not all of them, but it tends to go in that direction. And so what Russia has said, and Candace Owens is actually probably the one that's most aggressive about pushing this. It's just people haven't noticed it. Is that there's going to be an alliance between traditionalist Catholics and the Orthodox Christians led by the Russian Orthodox Church, and that's going to be actually the fulfillment of end times prophecy. That's what
Mm-hmm.
Russia teaches.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll say, "Oh, Catholic Orthodox alliance," but really what they mean is Catholics led by pro-Russia traditionalist Catholics and the Russian Orthodox Church leading the Orthodox Christians. It doesn't mean all of them, but they want to
Mm-hmm.
frame it that way. And so you can expect to see, and I feel like I've seen Russian bots do that. Well, I don't know if they're Russian bots. I've seen bots do this, really trying to aggravate and make personal the differences between Protestants and Christians, and that started happening at the same time that Candace Owens was really trying to push a Catholic Orthodox alliance, and that happened at the same time that Russia was talking about it, but that was really in the weeds, so nobody noticed. So that all happened at once. So I would expect over the next year or two that you're going to see a doubling down on that, trying to basically create a civil war between Catholics and Protestants, and then this Catholic Orthodox alliance, and that then teaming up with Russia probably at the same time.
Yeah. As I look at those three, I do wonder that connection. Joey, jump in here.
Yeah, one of the things, so obviously, I know several years ago, Russia passed a law about proselytizing outside of churches for non Orthodox Christians, non Russian Orthodox Christians. And so, like, obviously, Gio and I were Seventh day Adventists, right? But I know evangelical Christians, I know more like Mormons, Latter day Saints, Jehovah's Witnesses, right? Like, I certainly have disagreements with these groups, but I believe I'm an American and I believe in religious liberty for all people. And yet in Russia, right, all of us, right, if we're proselytizing and we're not Russian Orthodox and we're outside of our churches, we're sitting in Russian jail cells in Russia, like our co-religionists. And so it's one of those things where I've seen, and unfortunately, I've seen this not just Catholics, I've seen this among Protestants and whatever, and what I believe to be otherwise faithful people, people I know, right, who love Jesus and all these things, and they're kind of promoting the angle, and I've seen them say this, right? Like, listen, Putin may not be perfect, but he's not for same-sex marriage, right? He's against abortion, he's against this and against that. Now, I also know, because I've looked into it, like, actually Russia has quite a lot of abortion, right? There actually is
Yeah.
very little active church attendance. So it's like, how is the myth of like the Russia as like a Christian society, how does that play in to all this?
So they've been pushing that for a long time, but I really saw it escalate under the Obama administration. I think part of it was, how can I say this? Social issues are important, but is same-sex marriage as important as, I don't know, veterans being homeless on the street? Like it got, like, things got a little out of proportion where you can care about those issues, but it became the end-all be-all in an almost apocalyptic way. A lot of the language of saying, that because of this social issue advancing in the United States, America's going to be destroyed like Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's very easy to become anti-American when you point to the sinful areas of society, which, by the way, and I do criticize Christians, and I am a Christian, for not seeing the positive trends. Like, it's almost always, we're headed to the end time, so let's talk all day about the negative things getting worse, in order to get us there, when there's positive things happening too. And so around 2008, 2009, I felt like in the ecosystem of conservatives and Christians, it became easy to get this view of America as being overwhelmed by evil, being destined to being destroyed by Sodom and Gomorrah, that there's going to be like martial law if we all don't stand up and fight, fight, fight. Like it just, everything kind of got out of proportion. And I started seeing it actually on Fox News and in some talk radio places where, I guess, to needle Obama, they liked saying Well, look at how manly Putin is compared to him. Like the tribalism came first, but then it kind of led to soft pedaling Putin. And then as the relationship between the U.S. and Russia became worse under the Obama administration, and I backed the Obama administration under that, and it wasn't even that bad. Like Romney said that we should be more aggressive towards Russia, and Obama made fun of him for it. But it still declined under Obama. Some people, some parts of the right started just doing that again, that binary of like, all right, well, Obama is against Russia, Hillary is against Russia, therefore, by default, I'm pro-Russia. Biden is pro-Ukraine. All right, well, then I must be anti-Ukraine. And so the Russian disinformation operations were able to exploit that immensely. But I would say around 2008 is when I really started seeing a bit of that messaging going on, these broader intellectual problems happening among the Christian right. But then it was right around the Tea Party time. I just noticed it actually the other day. It was right around the time Glenn Beck gave a big speech in 2010. It was like right after that I used to read every single day, like 3 or 4 or more if there was a good trail, but like every day, at least 3 or 4 Russian propaganda news websites like Pravda and the other ones. And there was like a specific week where like they all just suddenly switched and started talking like they were Tea Party activists. And Putin was this great Christian leader. Conservative values are rising up against the evil globalists, Obama and the liberals. And I said that it was too sharp, too coordinated. Happened all at once. And it was right after Glenn Beck gave that speech where it was already there, but it like really just full on, they really went for it. And it's ironic and almost, I'm trying to find the right words for it, because this big discussion now about Tsarist Christianity that's happening, and there's a big debate about the orthobros, are they pro-Russia that's going on? That was all sparked because of, ironically enough, Glenn Beck covering my report for several days about this issue of Tsarist Christianity and Dugin and Russia promoting it several days. So it's like, it's just an interesting irony that 2010, you have the Tea Party movement, you have Glenn Beck's speech. Russia decides to mimic him, and that's like an initiating part of the conflict. And then at around the same time, you have Glenn Beck exposing it, and that's just really interesting to see it like kind of come full circle, because now we're entering a new era where this is actually being talked about. In 2010, I was talking about it. My career suffered quite a bit because when your employment and your source of income is tied to things going on politically, everyone tries to shut you up. Whether you have, if you have left-wing clients or right-wing clients, they all, listen to me, all try to muzzle and pressure you. And they will punish you. They say, oh, don't go after him. So like there's no moral objectivity. It just goes out the window. It's all about your team winning. And so I had to deal with a lot of pressure because of it. But now everything I said was going to happen is happening in a very big way. And it's just surreal to see.
You mentioned Glenn Beck in that speech. Are there any others who are sounding the alarm that you can share with the audience?
There's a lot of people like Ben Shapiro and the others who are talking about the woke right in general. James Lindsay, there's a lot of people talking about that. But the right framing, so you can see how it's actually an ideological offensive. It's not just about anti-Semitism. It's not just about anti-Israel sentiment. Like, this is a contrived operation. It's a foreign attack. It's a foreign cognitive attack. Glenn Beck is the only one I'm aware of putting that out there in any significant way. Ben Shapiro has done a good job of talking about the Russia connections. There's talk of the Russia connections to people like Candace and Tucker because they've made it so overt that everybody commented on it. But I feel like that's mentioned secondary to the personalities, where they say, oh, look, here's more evidence that they're crazy. They're up to something suspicious without understanding the broader dynamic of this is an ideological attack on Christians in America that began in the 90s, and you're just seeing it bear fruit now and escalate, and it's going to get a lot worse.
how did? Well, go ahead, Joey.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say. Well, one thing I just wanted to affirm in what you said is, so I've been conservative all my life, right? Obviously, I wasn't old enough to vote yet in the Obama administration, but I was like, oh, I was that kid raising money for my class for first McCain, then Romney, right? Like I've always been a conservative, and I to this day, right, I don't regret supporting either of those men, right? I still am a conservative. I still disagree with Obama. But I guess the biggest thing that changed, like, and it's towards what you said about not everything's getting worse, right? America's still a great country. It was a great. I grew up basically in a lot of ways during the Obama years. I mean, I can remember Bush some too, but it's like I grew up and I had a great childhood. I was free, and recently, my friend, a friend of mine, who used to go to a Bible study with me. He recently moved to be a missionary in Nigeria, and every day in Nigeria, every obviously we're Adventists, right? So every Saturday and every Sunday that the Christians go to church, they do so knowing someone could like it's not a stretch that someone could walk into their church and execute them for being Christians and for worshiping. Right? I've never experienced that, and I've lived under I've lived under Bush, I've lived under Obama, I've lived under Trump and Biden. Never experienced that, right? And so, right, when I see people talk about whether it's back when Biden was president or whatever, it's like I'd rather have this strong leader from this other country. It's like, no, you wouldn't. You would rather live in America, right? And I think we should
Right.
acknowledge that. And I think that's one. I do think that's key to helping to fight these influence operations is reminding people that what we have here is not the norm in much of the world.
Right. I think that's absolutely true. I think we have to fight the pessimism overall, which
Hmm.
has the least amount of merit than at any point in American history. I mean, you are living at the by far best time in human history to be alive. And it's actually rapidly getting better by just about every single metric. My favorite newsletter, I think Cato Institute came up with it, and then they split off or something, but it's by Human Progress, and it's called Doom Slayer. And every single week, I think it's every week, the newsletter comes out and it just has news headlines that aren't like feel good stories about someone doing something nice, because we know that goes on. It's all about like data and trends showing that things are getting better and rapidly better around the world and in America. And honestly, as a national security objective, like homeland security objective, I would be fine with using taxpayer money to promote that thing. If somehow that would result in Americans reading that every single week, like that's how important I think that newsletter is, because that's kind of the common denominator between all these extremist ideologies, that America is failing, America is going to get worse. It's all doom and gloom, and that's why you have to look to other ideologies, whether it's communism or Tsarist Christianity. The starting point is all America is terrible, it's failing, it's going to get worse, and therefore things that were prohibited before, like betraying your country, well, the situation's a little different now. And that's how you breed violence. Because you say, all right, well, things have gotten so bad that, yeah, I'm anti-violence, but now it's different. Now it's like 1776. So I think we have to combat that. I think you're absolutely right on about that. And the gravitation towards like foreign leaders, you're right in it. I feel like it's easier to address the pessimism because it doesn't require knowledge about international affairs, which Americans are notoriously not great at.
Yeah.
But if we can educate Americans about international affairs and let them know that like Russia is not a model of Christianity, like that's insane. Again, by
Hmm.
every metric except for the leadership basically saying they want to create a theocracy. But if you look at the religious characteristics of that society and like the people who are pro Russia say, oh, well, it's because I give up on American freedom and Western freedom. The Russian message is basically this false choice. It says you have to choose between your faith or your country. If you choose your country first and your constitution, then you have to accept Christianity going away. That the society is going to get sicker because people don't believe in God anymore, and things are going to get worse and worse. Or you can choose your faith before your country, but then you've got to have a little bit of theocracy and authoritarianism that keeps society in line with your
Hmm.
Christian values. Otherwise, it's going to die, and it's a false choice. But that's a choice. Like I've heard people even outside this context talking about as long as I can remember. It's been increasing. And I'm like, what are you talking? Like, how are we in this mindset of things are getting so much worse and just forgetting about every positive trend? Like even the numbers about Christians, there's fewer and fewer people identifying as Christians lately in America.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really dive into the numbers, you really analyze it, what's probably happening is people who didn't really believe in it before anyway. It just
Mm-hmm.
became more fashionable to become atheist and agnostic and to identify as that. And so people are doing that who previously might have said they're Christian, but they weren't like into it. Uh, I'll take that trade off. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like that. So there's ways of looking at this, and you have to compare it to Russia. Like you said, the sky high abortion rate. Look at the alcoholism. Look at the things that they do internationally and what they're doing in Ukraine. How they persecute Christians all the time. Like Putin kissed the Quran. Most people don't know this. There's a part of Russia called Chechnya where he has a Sharia law instituting jihadist who serves Putin in power. In power. So the great Christian
Mm-hmm.
assists Sharia law in his own country as long as this jihadist is in power, because the jihadist helps recruit jihadists that fight for Putin in Ukraine. But like almost nobody knows this. And so when Putin goes there and he went to the guy's mosque, he gave him a Quran as a gift. I think it had gold plates on it, and Putin kissed it. I mean, what are you talking about? That this is like your big Christian leader into the future? It's just astonishing to me. But luckily, it's so hypocritical that if everybody who's watching this and every Christian made it their duty that when they see an influencer or even just an average person on social media saying something like this, oh, Russia's the great, Christian leader of Christianity, just take one of these links or take a screenshot of the webpage, because people don't click links. Take a screenshot. Don't argue with them. Just post it under their Instagram post, their X post, whatever it is. Just Putin kissing the Quran, Putin backing jihadists, Putin saying that we have to fight the demonization of Islam. Well, actually, that might have been the Russian Orthodox Church, but it's the same thing. Like, just that. Because so in that way you don't have this, like, if you start arguing with people, they always double down on their position, and you don't want that. So don't argue with them. Just post the screenshot and walk away. And if everybody did that, we could turn this around. I really do think that.
So let me ask you this, because well, go ahead, Joey.
I'm just so on that Islam connection, right? That's as you're saying that, right? Like that brings him to my mind. Obviously, in recent years, now obviously it's the exact opposite of what he used to say on Fox News, right? Tucker Carlson, right? I remember, right? I watched these clips, right? He was talking about right Sharia law being this dangerous anti-American thing and all that,
Yeah.
and then now in his own show, he's starting to like, well, actually, I kind of want a house in, I think it's Dubai, or and I can do that because I'm
Qatar.
an American, and like. And I mean, like, sure, Qatar, yeah. And I'm like, sure, I mean, you can, but why would you want to? But like, I've seen this like warming to Islam on like what we call the woke right. But then I would also add that for a long time, like the social justice like left, right? Like, there's been that what's been called like the Red Green Alliance with them. So it's like, is the Islam piece with like obviously both the left and then now the woke right? Is that like integral to all this? Like, how would you explain Islam's connection?
So you're right that there were signs that Tucker was pro-Russia while he was at Fox, while he was there, because he was there's some things he had said that indicated that was underneath the surface. He didn't talk about Israel much, even though he had the primetime show, and Israel would be dominating the headlines, stay away from it. So a lot of this, you saw signs of this going way back. I used to be on Fox sometimes 3-4 times a week, so I talked to Tucker. I talked to Megyn Kelly. Like, we weren't friends or whatever. They may not even remember me, but I interacted with them enough that their guard was down a little bit. And Megyn Kelly was a true believer as far as I could tell. Like, I didn't see any problems with her. But Tucker, there were some things he would say where I'm like, yeah, he's a little bit more Ron Paul pro-Russia than he's letting on publicly. But then the Islam stuff came later. And that's could just be that it's just the ecosystems dovetail. I mean, you have the conspiracy theory ecosystem. You get people in there, and it's the same one that Qatar and Turkey and the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas pull from, and the Russians pull from it also. And now the next stage, and this we know is deliberately deceptive. Like the Tsarist Christianity, there's some Christians who genuinely just believe in it, almost like this collective salvation, like like part of salvation is being part of a saved country, and it's this collectivist mindset. So some believe in that. But Dugin, we now know because they recently discovered text from long ago, almost like I think maybe 20 to 50 people even know it exists. He actually did a whole text about how to weaponize conspiracy theories. And in there, he said, one of our problems with manipulating the Christians in America is they believe Gog and Magog of end times prophecy includes Russia. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I don't know.
It's wrong.
Because I've some Bible prophecy that say it isn't, but whatever. But he's right. The Christians who are really devout and then get into end times prophecy type stuff, that most said Russia qualifies as Gog and Magog, is at least part or all of that. And so he said we need to, something to the effect we need to mirror that. Now, what just started happening, I mean, past like few months, is Dugin and others, the Russian Orthodox Church was kind of hinting at this, but Dugin really spelled it out, is pushing a mirroring of that, where they say, actually, according to end times prophecy, the Antichrist is supposed to be Jewish, and so he'll be out of Israel.
Nope.
And the great Satan, the Antichrist, is actually going to be the Zionist bloc led by the Jewish Antichrist. So that's the U.S., the Western Europe, and all of that, or actually most of Europe. And then the good guys, according to end times prophecy, is going to be, on the one hand, the katekon, which is an entity or a person that battles the Antichrist and tries to restrain him. And actually, they believe he restrains him for a while, but then he rises. And they say that's Russia. So Russia, the katekon, which is they say is Russia, and then Russia leads Orthodox Christians, and then the Mahdi, the messianic figure of Islam. So Dugin and the Russian government, the Russian Orthodox Church, now endorse Islamic end times prophecy and say it's compatible with Christian end times prophecy. That's just they're compatible, just emphasizing different parts. And so what they're preaching is that the katekon, the Russian Orthodox Church-led real Christians, but primarily the Orthodox, will ally with the Mahdi and the Islamic world, and Iran specifically, in fighting the Jewish Antichrist, which is the Zionist bloc. And so they're putting that out there, and the fact that they're still pushing that tells me that they're going to do everything they can to make that a thing in the American church. They're going to start seeding that into the ecosystem if they aren't already. 1 or 2 years, you're going to start seeing people like Tucker and his brother and Candace start hinting at it. You're going to see it because right now they're just kind of slowly injecting the themes in there about end times, and then they're going to say, you gotta incrementally move people there. But that is their next play, and that is going to get that's going to become a thing, as crazy as it is. In the American Christian community.
Well, let me jump in here, Joey, real quick.
Yeah.
What all major religions have in common, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, is that there's going to be this end time battle right before the God arrives. To the Jews, it's the Messiah they've been waiting for. For the Christians, it's obviously Jesus Christ. But what a lot of people don't know is that for a great portion of Islam, it's not Muhammad coming back, it's Isa. And Isa is Jesus. And so the nations and people who don't understand their scripture are ripe for the false appearance of Christ. Satan impersonating Christ. And unless you know your Bible and unless you are a good Berean who study these things for yourself, I can tell you right now, and obviously we're not going to get into it at the moment, but no, Russia's not part of the end times in the sense of Gog and Magog. This end time battle, it's a lot bigger. And in the end, there's only two groups, those who are faithful to Christ and those who are not. So you're going to lump them all in together. But it's interesting that you mentioned that because of that notion of Islam expecting Isa to come back. And Christians are expecting Jesus to come back, and Jews are expecting the Messiah. And then Hindu and Buddhism, while they have so many gods, they don't care who comes back. You know what I mean? And so it's interesting that if they're pushing this, right? This faction is pushing this. Is look up, for your redemption is near, man. Something's brewing, and obviously in the end, God intervenes to put an end to it. Joey, you were gonna say?
Yeah, and I was just going to say that, well, obviously, as a Christian, right, who, obviously I have my own views on these things, like, I don't agree with either the view that Dugin wanted to counteract or the view that Dugin's promoting. But what I really took away from what you were saying is, listen, so I believe, right, when Christ said his kingdom is not of this world, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, as a Christian, my goal, I want people to be ready for Christ's second coming, everybody. But I don't want to use the government to get people ready for Christ's second coming. I want to go out there and persuade them and preach the
Mm-hmm.
gospel, right? Lift up Christ. But what I noticed, right, is that anytime when there's a governing philosophy, right, people in government and politics who have um, eschatological views motivating their politics, we get bad things, right? So
Yep.
whether it's the mullahs in Iran who basically have this view they want to bring about the third imam, or whether it's the Duginites and the Putinists who have these other eschatological views and they want a government to do it, right? To me, I
Mm-hmm.
would say, well, first of all, that's a blasphemy, right? You're trying to use the machines of a kingdom that's not Christ's kingdom
Well,
to bring.
it's
No,
the same
Christ isn't going to
spirit.
come
It's
on
the
your
same
time. It's
spirit
going to
of
only kingdom on
Judas.
his.
It's the same spirit of Judas who tried to force Jesus' hand. You know what I mean? That
Hmm.
spirit will never win out.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and the Russian Orthodox Church preaches that you can wipe away all your sin if you die in one of Russia's wars. Like that, like Russia invades Ukraine, and then the Russian Orthodox Church just kind of announces that. So
Mm-hmm.
the Russian version of Christianity is very similar to Islamism. So I can see why, aside from the geopolitics, Russia being allied with Iran, I can see why they'd say they want to fuse this together. Because there was always a limit on that relationship, because they would say, well, if we're Russian Orthodox and those are jihadists, then like one day aren't they going to turn on us, because the jihadists do attack Russia,
Yeah.
some, and then others work for them. And so the way they've papered over those differences is by putting together this view of the end times that says you don't have to really choose between, at least until after the Battle of Armageddon,
Mm-hmm.
choose between Islamism and Christianity. You're actually called to ally with each other and not have a conflict. So that papers over that difference in their mind. But again, the key way to fight that, aside from, like, I guess you could have an eschatological argument. I don't know how many people are prepared for that. But the text by Aleksandr Dugin, where he specifically says, we better lie about this, and then later on does it, that's a pretty much smoking gun. That's what's frustrating me, is that a lot of this stuff that's so dangerous, the smoking guns where you can just post a screenshot, are there, and
Mm-hmm.
then to convince people, but it's just
You
people
know,
don't know about them, or if they do know about them, people don't do much.
the underlying of a lot of these, even Christian sects and even Islam, the underlying philosophies, the ends justify the means. In other words, whatever they have to do to bring their agenda across, they're willing to do. And whether it's twist scripture like this Dugin guy, or make friendships that don't seem to make sense, but if they think, both sides are probably thinking, let's use them to bring our agenda. You know what I mean? And they're but I didn't want to leave though tonight without asking the left. They're seeing this. What are their views on it? Are they egging it? Are they egging the Russians on, or are they egging on the Republicans or the conservative movement, or are they not worried about it at all and kind of saying let them hang themselves in their own rope? What's their view, if you're aware of it?
Yeah, sure. There's a little bit of a split where there's some anarchists and communists that back Ukraine because they look at it and they say what Russia's doing is horrible, like that, like we can't be on their side. And then there's others who will say, oh, well, we back what Russia's doing. And then there's actually a third option where there are those that condemn Russia, but also say the U.S. and NATO and Ukraine are the bigger threat, and the U.S. shouldn't be involved. So it was like oh, Russia shouldn't invade Ukraine, but the West is still worse.
Mm.
So those are kind of like there's a little bit of a split there. But the common thread between the far left, the communists, the anarchists, and then the Islamists who are split. There's the Islamists now. Some of them team up with the woke left, and then some are embracing social conservatives on the right because they don't like LGBT, transgender stuff.
Yeah.
So they're splitting. The common thread here is a belief that American society would be better off essentially burning down, that there has to be a revolution of some kind. So you have Tucker, who at his core, this is really important. He said the best system would be the feudal system. Now, you can't go around saying America first if you're pro-American and say, oh, the feudal system, like that's anti-everything.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
anti-purpose of America. Yeah, Nick Fuentes wants he said he wants a Catholic dictatorship, a monarchy. You look at what the goals, and they don't talk about it too often, of all of these actors, it all involves basically destroying America. Now, my argument is that it's time to modernize how we view all of politics, all the divisions and everything, because it stayed in one spot for a very long time, and a lot of this is happening because we haven't modernized our awareness of what's actually happening. I think vast majority of Republicans and Democrats, regardless of how they're voting, I don't see voting as the determinant factor of which side you're on. To me, that's a lower priority.
Yeah.
The priority here has to be objective morality and where you stand on that, because that's what you need for civil society to operate. So the enemy's targeting civil society, not so much one political party beating the other. So I'm going to focus there. Are you a positive actor in civil society? Not whether I agree with you or not. Are you contributing to a healthy civil society? Is kind of like my number one thing. And if you look at what the extremists on the far left and the far right, who they're targeting, and how the far left and far right are becoming more and more overtly one thing, from my perspective, what I see is actually, believe it or not, Trump, McCain, Obama, all of them are actually in one category. It's in one, you may not like some of them on policy and stuff, but they weren't trying to light the world on fire, in my opinion. I do not see the evidence to justify the demonization that each side has done of all these people. I see that all as magnified. But there's just one global seditionist movement. It's international, extends into the U.S. There is no far left. There is no far right. They are all seditionists, and there's diversity, but you can be a singular threat with diversity inside of it. Just
yeah.
The Allies didn't all have the same ideologies and systems. No way. So to me, it's the global seditionist movement as one thing. I was saying that type of thing for a long time. Now it's becoming clearer when you see Tucker having far left people like Dennis Kucinich on his show. So people are realizing this now. It's the global seditionist movement versus Republicans and Democrats, Christians and non-Christians, liberals and conservatives who want to improve America. They don't want to destroy it. They may disagree, but they actually, if you look at the polls on most issues, most Americans agree on most things. A lot of this is artificial, the conflict that you see and the demonization goes on. It's all part of a business model. So that's how I view it. When you ask about the left and the right, I'm like, you know what? It's all, I don't know if I even view things that way anymore. It's just
I see.
Those that are good for American civil society, and then everything else is secondary to that.
Yeah, I see that point. I could see it. And I actually, agree with that in the big picture, right? In the huge bird's eye or systematic view of society. And to me, there's only two groups: those who follow Christ and those who don't. And you don't have to know Christ necessarily by name, right? We're judged according to the light that we know. And so, but that being said, let me ask you this. Have you read Malachi Martin's book, Keys of This Blood? It was a 1980, in the 80s, early 90s kind of huge book. And Malachi Martin was a Catholic priest who kind of went rogue. Not that he disavowed the church, but that he kind of shared state secrets that shouldn't be shared. Noting like internal memos. And the long story short of the internal memo of Malachi Martin's book, The Keys of This Blood, is that the Pope sees himself as a geopolitical power with the two superpowers, or the three really, but mainly Russia and China. I mean, Russia and the United States, as to who's going to lead the globe in moral influence. And so, when I go back to the Tucker, Candace, Megyn Kelly's, all these people with this Catholic influence, it's things that make you go, at least for me, right? And it's not out of nowhere. And I'm not even going to bring in the Bible at the point, just from things like Malachi Martin's book. It was a big deal. It's a big, I think, 800 to 1,000 page tome. This all seems to come full circle. We are the planet is big, but in a sense is very small, right? You can influence other countries so quickly now. Where back in the day you had to take a boat, travel 2 months, and you met with a few influencers. Now through TikTok, X, YouTube here, like we're doing, influence is I'll end with this. People are tossed to and fro. If you recognize, right, the Bible verse, people are tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. And those of us who pursue truth are going to be led by that, regardless of political affiliation. Joey, any last question? And then we'll give Ryan the last word.
Yeah, so I have a practical question, but just I'm kind of combining both of your points there. Like for me, one of the things that I've tried to start viewing everything through. So it's like my political North Star. For me, it's the Declaration of Independence of the United States, right? These ideas that were set forth, right? All men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, right? And then it's the Constitution, right? Our law, but I mean, really, for me, the Declaration is even more important, but the Constitution is certainly important too. So these are my things. So it's like you may disagree with me on some things, right? I have friends on the left, right? Right. I disagree with them. We have arguments, right? And then we go out and watch a game together or whatever. Like we're still friends. We vote differently. We argue passionately. We're still friends. But it's like, but they still, in their own way, they still respect our Constitution. They respect our Declaration. It's like we can have arguments if we agree on those fundamentals. So like obviously like Gio, I have disagreements with Catholics, right? And obviously if I didn't have disagreements with them, I'd be one, right? And I have disagreements with Orthodox Americans, and obviously this conversation highlights where one danger with Orthodox, right? But I have disagreements with even other Protestants, but like at the end of the day, I'll defend religious freedom for all Americans. And
Amen.
if you're Catholic or Orthodox or Muslim or Jewish, and you'll agree with me on the Declaration and the Constitution, right? We can live together. We can have, to your point, we can have a civil society together. And I think if we can find ways to highlight that, and that kind of goes into my last question is, listen, obviously I don't have political power, right? We do this podcast. I talk about politics, and write about stuff and whatever, but I don't have that much influence. But I'm a normal Christian guy. I go to church, right? I live in a small community, right? Like, how would you say a practical thing someone like me can make a difference day to day in kind of preserving the good ideas, preserving America's civil society? Like, what would be your advice, like practically, to just the average American who loves his country?
I would say that if you're the type of person to go on the offensive a little bit, um, what I said before about just have a few smoking gun things that when you come across someone who says something like Russia's a great Christian country, you have a few smoking guns that you can screenshot. Don't argue with them, and you don't even have to know them. Just put it as a reply post, or you send to someone and just let them stew it over. Don't get into a argument because now it's like a contest, and that doesn't really go anywhere.
Hmm.
If somebody wants to I just have to put this pitch out there. I do have a nonprofit if you want to
No,
support my
no.
work. I do a range of things
We were
that,
going to ask you about that. We'll let you
yeah,
plug that. Go ahead.
thank you. So I have a podcast called The Counter Offensive, but I want to continue doing this work. But if you want to do it and be independent, it either doesn't pay or it doesn't pay well. So I really depend upon people's help. So you can make a tax deductible donation at ryanmauro.com if you'd like. I just need just a little bit of help in order to pull this thing off. And you'll learn more about the really impactful things that I try to be a part of, because I don't want to just be a political commentator. It's the counteroffensive because I want to help other people do specific things and have specific impacts. Now, as for what can people do, like I said, the one thing is just having those smoking guns that you just put, like, just try to reach everybody. Like, you don't necessarily need to spam, but like, you see someone that posts something, and instead of being debating them, just post a screenshot. Putin kissing the Quran. What about this? And then just walk away or engage if you feel like you won't lose your temper and you can do so constructively, and it won't turn into a tribal contest type thing. But I would say in terms of civil dialogue, and this is really the most important thing you can do, is understand that the entire global seditious movement, all the enemies of the U.S., believe that every time you interact with someone is a little bit of a battle. It either adds strength to the armor of the United States or it chips at it. Every interaction, every single interaction that you have. So if you repost something that you haven't verified, because you're like, oh, that's probably right, you chipped at America's armor. The time when you insult someone or you lose your temper, you take it personally and you have a conversation that is not constructive, you chipped away at America's armor. Every time you walk away from a conversation and you feel like you learned something and they learned something from you, you strengthened America's armor. I would encourage people I taught for 12 years for Liberty and Regent universities, Homeland Security and also political science. We had 1 week, and this is the only school that I know that did this. I taught online 1 week where your one assignment was to react to George Washington's farewell address. That is the single most transformational thing anybody can read, because it affects you personally, politically, spiritually, every single way. And the way I got to see students walk away impacted by that is unlike anything else. That is George Washington's last warning to America. Say, you want to survive, here's what you should do and what you should not do. And if you don't follow this advice, here's what's going to happen. There is a process. And he outlines it, and it is like the best political commentary for today I've ever read. Like, yeah, everyone will relate to it. You'll be like, my God, that's like the best diagnosis of today. So I would encourage people to read that and share it with people. So those are a few of the things that people can do depending on how you want to get involved. But the thing everybody should do is contribute positively to American civil society. And I personally like to enter every conversation with the premise, we're both wrong. No matter, our brains are so small compared to God and what the objective truth is, that no matter what we say, we're actually just arguing about who's more wrong. Because somehow we are wrong in what we're saying.
Or who's less wrong, I guess.
Who's less wrong or who's more, and go in with that humility. And if that humility was pervasive in American society, like, that's another common denominator. All these extremists are arrogant. They all think they know. Everyone else is satanic and everyone else is stupid. If there was humility, like, and that across the board, none of this would be happening.
Yeah, I agree. Even if you're right, be humble. Right? Even if you're right, be humble. And so before we let you go, because I have the audience knows on Monday nights I got to wake up at 4:40 in the morning. But once again, let people know where they can find you. What social medias, where can they donate? Plug yourself. Go ahead.
Sure. They can sign up for my newsletter or donate at ryanmauro.com. And you can follow me on X or any social media just by searching Ryan Mauro, Mauro. And it'll be either Real Ryan Mauro or Ryan Mauro, depending on which one you go to. And that's how we stay connected.
Amen for that. All right. Until next time on the Gio and Joey Show, I pray that you've been blessed. This is fascinating to me because it does have biblical implications in the long run of how society's going out. But we'll save that for another day. Until the next time on the Gio and Joey Show, be blessed. Ryan, stay on for a second as the screen goes dark.